Good morning, this is Ian R. Crane. Sorry for the delay. Had a little bit of a problem with connectivity this morning. It's a little wild, windy. It's not actually raining right this second, but it's not snowing either, which is the good news. And well, as you can hear, my voice is getting better. So the Manuka honey and the lemon and the ginger seems to be doing the job it's supposed to do. Well, here we are. It's Tuesday, the 23rd of January, 2018, which equates to day 76 since Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, submitted their application to Frack at Kirby Misperton to Greg Clark. And obviously over the last few days we've been discussing the significance of the delay and the prospect that much of this delay is related to the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy very much being aware of Keith Cochrane's relationship with Third Energy. And you know what it is about these senior executives who seem to have an attraction to failing companies. Of course, Keith Cochrane was brought in, I think, after the second profits warning had been issued by Carillion in the latter part of last year, coinciding with the time that he was appointed to the board of Third Energy, perhaps on the basis that they thought Cochrane had been appointed to Carillion because he was a master at blagging cash for failing companies. And of course that's exactly what Third Energy is. It's a failing company. Actually, I would argue it's a failed company. You know, a company that's effectively sitting on £90 million worth of negative net worth, far in excess of the assets of the company. It should be dissolved. It should be sold off for pennies on the pound, and effectively the assets redistributed. Well, that ain't going to happen, of course, because that would be a massive embarrassment to the British government. But although this particular government seems to be able to just shrug off any amount of embarrassment, because you know what we are seeing is the failing spiv culture, this greed is good culture, where, you know, unless you are motivated by sheer the obscenity of greed, then basically you will be laughed out of court. And anybody who has the audacity to show any social conscience is effectively unemployable. But nonetheless, you know, the good news is that this is helping more and more people wake up to reality. And you know, the title of today's video is really it's only a conspiracy theory if you haven't looked at the facts. And I've really taken that from somebody who contacted me yesterday, having taken the time through the day to actually look at the conjecture of the links between the unconventional gas agenda, i.e. the deep borehole agenda, and the prospect of using those deep boreholes for the disposal of toxic nuclear waste. Now, you know, the reality is that it is over 4 years since I first mooted this as a possibility on an episode of Fracking Nightmare in late 2013. By late 2014, it was more than just a hypothesis, because by that time I had actually caught Natalie Ayler, the siting manager for radioactive waste management, and asked her the direct question, and deer in the headlights moment doesn't even come close. Of course, Natalie Ayler is no longer directly associated with radioactive waste management. She has now gone off and set up her own consultancy, which, call it a hunch, I would suggest is probably going to be contracted to radioactive waste management as they repeat their exercise of going around the country trying to find a community that is mug enough to accept the bribe to put a deep geological disposal beneath their community. Well, the person that contacted me said that they'd heard this and just dismissed it as a rampant conspiracy theory. Now, this is a phrase, it was actually coined by Ayn Rand in the 1950s, and it was the phrase used to dismiss any hypothesis, any theory, any conjecture that went against the formal government orthodoxy in the US, and particularly around the time of the Kennedy assassination. And today it is still used in much the same way, but what it does is it demonstrates immediately when somebody uses this phrase that they haven't looked at the subject. They dismiss it as a conspiracy theory because they have not looked at the facts, and they are simply regurgitating whatever information they have been fed by the mainstream media. And of course, this is the role of the mainstream media. It is propaganda. It's to create a worldview, a simplistic worldview that is not based on anything other than what they read in the media or watch on the British Bullshit Corporation. That is the art of control, population control. But fortunately, what is happening, and the unconventional gas agenda in this country is serving us very, very well in this. It is blatant in the fact that it is showing the degree to which politicians and industrialists are prepared to lie blatantly. When the evidence is clear for all to see, they will still deny that evidence. And this is an absolute gift in so many respects. And this particular individual said that this was really the final straw for them, because they had been looking at some of the other things that I had been talking about and others have been talking about for many years, and realized that there is more than an element of truth, and I quote that, more than an element of truth in what we've said. And this particular individual said that, you know, up until a few years ago, they had no concept of fractional reserve banking. They had no idea how banking worked. They'd always assumed that the money lent by banks was the deposits of other investors. They hadn't actually understood that the banks create money out of thin air. It is simply a case of injecting noughts onto a computer screen and then charging the individual, the company, or indeed the government interest on that money that didn't exist in the first place. So, you know, we have a national debt of £1.8 trillion, but to whom is it owed? Because much of that debt doesn't actually exist. It was money created out of nothing, so that the banks have the opportunity to charge interest on it. And then what they do, of course, if you fail to keep the payments of the agreed terms, then basically they will come after your assets, be that your house, be that your business, be that whatever it is that they've loaned the money for. And of course what we're seeing now is the revelation that over the past years, since the crash of 2008, many of the banks have used this as an opportunity to claw in those assets. So having created the money out of nothing to loan those businesses money, now what they've done is they've clawed back the assets of those companies on the basis that the loan repayment terms were not met, or even in some cases, even if they were. Fractional reserve banking, the opportunity for the banks to create money out of nothing. It's more mythical than alchemy. You know, at least alchemy, you need a raw material to start with. With fractional reserve banking, you need nothing other than a pen and a ledger or a computer screen. So this person had had their eyes woken up on the British or the global finance system. Then the other area that they said was that they looked at some of the comments that I had made, and then they looked at the work of others regarding our legal system. and the fact that we have a legal system that is effectively unlawful. In fact, the word legal, according to a 19th century edition of Black's Law Dictionary, the word legal actually means the undoing of God's law. And you know, who would ever believe that when you are registering a birth, when you are registering the birth of that child, you think you are reporting the fact that that child has birthed into this physical realm. You know, what you're actually doing, of course, is reporting the child as lost at sea. And of course, this is absurd. It's meant to sound absurd so that nobody will believe you. But of course, from that point forward, once the child has been registered as lost at sea, the child has 7 years, or the parents have 7 years to actually report that the child is not lost at sea and is actually a living soul, but nobody does that. So from that point forward, the state is able to administer the estate of that lost soul through probity. That is why when you go to the civil courts, when you go to the bankruptcy courts, you appear before a registrar, not a judge, because the registrar is administering the estate of a dead soul. Now, you know, these are aspects of British life where the vast majority of people still have no concept of the lies and the deceit with which the government administers their lives. And unfortunately, they do so by the consent. It's not open consent, it's just apathetic consent. Because provided life isn't made too tough, then nobody really looks at this stuff. And anybody who does suggest it is just dismissed as a rampant conspiracy theorist. Just like the people who in North Holland, around the Groningen area, some 25-30 years ago, reported that the gas extraction from the Groningen geology was causing an increase in seismic activity. Well, just recently, some 10,000 people have marched through Groningen and also in Amsterdam and also The Hague to protest against the deception by the government and the ignorance of the Dutch media in reporting the fact that some 2,500 properties around the Groningen area have been damaged, and I think about 10% of those have been absolutely condemned. Now, this is natural gas, this is conventional gas, this is just massive gas exploitation causing massive seismic activity, i.e. subsidence causing property damage. Yet a few years ago that was just dismissed as a conspiracy theory. It's only a conspiracy theory whilst the government thinks that you will not be bothered to actually do your research and go and actually take a look at the facts for yourselves. So there's so many other aspects. I'm not even going to go through the full portfolio, but you have to work on the basis that everything you think you know is probably wrong. And if you start on that premise, then you will actually enter full adulthood. Because until such time as you embrace that premise, then you are effectively living as a child. And your childminder is the state. And the state is very happy to keep you in childlike ignorance. And the good news is that this unconventional gas agenda in the UK is actually acting as a catalyst, and it's dragging people towards full adulthood, where they take responsibility for themselves and for their own worldview and do not accept what they are fed at face value by the state propaganda machines. So in some regards, you know, to keep this unconventional gas agenda rolling in the UK is an absolute gift, because the longer it goes on, the more communities that are targeted, the more people are going to go, hang on a second. If my government is lying to me about this, and it's very clear, even after some cursory research, that not only are they lying, they are refusing to acknowledge the blatantly obvious facts of the matter, then what else are they lying about? And the reality is almost everything. And there's no question the likes of nasty Nick Greeley of Reimagined Gas, who knows fine well that he has no counter to the facts, so he can only launch into ad hominem attack, and he will take great delight in pointing out that once again Ian Crane shows that he's just a rampant conspiracy theorist. Yes, I am a rampant conspiracy theorist to those who haven't looked at the facts. And unfortunately, of course, that dismissive term will discourage some people from even looking at the facts. But those are the people who are unlikely to actually contribute to bringing about any change anyway. What we are more interested in is those who are effectively in adolescence. In other words, they've broken out of the childlike state of believing everything that they are fed, and they are starting to take responsibility for their worldview and moving rapidly to full adulthood. And we are seeing this all around us. Every single person I speak to now is experiencing random conversations where people are discussing elements of life in the UK which give them cause for concern, which a few years ago would have simply met the response of, you're just a rampant conspiracy theorist. But now people are seeing it for what it is. Try telling somebody that the NHS is being deliberately collapsed, and if they immediately agree with you, then we are starting to see somebody who is looking at the situation for themselves. Because of course the lamestream media will tell you that Jeremy Hunt is pumping more money into the NHS than ever before. Well, he might be, but of course it's being siphoned out by the spiv managers of the public finance initiatives like Virgin, which are taking over these public services, not for the benefit of the public, but for the benefit of the spiv leaders who are at the helm of these companies, whose only motivation is greed, sheer personal greed, with no single iota of interest in the well-being of the communities that they're supposed to be serving. So this is really the key message for today, because here we are. Greg Clark still hasn't signed off on Barclays Bank's application to frack Kirby Misperton. We've got Quadrilla bragging that it's just managed to raise the finance to keep its operations going at Preston Road, but it did so, of course, by selling off one of its key assets, or selling 25% of one of its key assets down in Borkham. So what we've got is these companies all now trying to bail each other out, hoping that when they find themselves in the mire, that their fellow unconventional gas bandits will jump in and throw some cash at them. It's whoever has the banks on the hook at that particular moment in time. But the whole edifice is coming down. And I sense that 2018 is going to be the year that the unconventional gas industry is finally brought to a halt in the UK. But what I seriously hope is that the community that has been pulled together through this abomination will keep going and looking at the other issues. Because the people who have aligned themselves with the anti-fracking community clearly have a social conscience. That may not necessarily have been their initial motivation, but as their research goes on and as they dig deeper, they will realise that whilst it may have been self-interest initially, that the wider implications are so enormous that they cannot be ignored. and hopefully this community will look at the other issues that affect whether it's their local community or the wider community. But you know, once people are aware, once people have seen through the veneer, you can't unsee it. So it's a blustery day here, and you know what, I'm going to spend the day building and just reflecting on the fact that this is a community that has enormous potential. It has the potential to bring about change that we all know that we need to see, that goes way beyond just fracking. So please, you know, share this around, and you know, let's get the word out. Let's encourage people to do their own research. This is the key element, because once people come to the realization for themselves, that's when it takes on a real life. You know, it's interesting, realize they see things through real eyes, as opposed to the filters put in place by the establishment to prevent them from seeing the truth. So thanks for joining me today, and you know, tomorrow is day 77. It will be 11 weeks since Greg Clark received the application to frack at Kirby Misperton, and surely the day is coming where Greg Clark has to pull the plug on Kirby Misperton. And you know, let's send that message, Greg. Let's send it through the industry, and you know, send the message to your colleagues in government that regardless of the pressure from the leadership, you at least, as Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, have the cojones to do the right thing. Because you know fine well that if you don't, not only is your political career over, but you will also be condemning future generations to lives of absolute abject misery. And many of those people will be from communities where you grew up on Teesside. So thanks for joining me, and I'll catch with you tomorrow.